Okay, so if we bought this car out of the box, gear mesh slipped, so let's see what we got to do there first. You can just loosen these 4 screws on most RevoSlot cars and the body pries open, and there we have the chassis. So because on the mini cars or group 2 there's not a lot of room, they've had to use a motor bracket with only one side with a screw. So what I recommend, and what we do, get at the wheel here. First off, I'm going to take the wheel off on this side. I'm going to take the gear off, and then I'm going to make sure that everything is tight here. Okay, the motor was reasonably tight, but it wasn't completely tight. Then we're going to make sure that the wheel is on tight. One there. And I like to stagger these through 3 different spaces on the axle. So 120 apart. So one there, and I'll put this one here. And then before I do the gear, I want to see what the wheels are like. So we'll just make sure that the wheels are spinning well. Okay, we'll take the tyres off and look. Yeah, they look to be nice and round. Okay, we'll bring the gear back into play. So we have one there, and then the gear I would put here. Alright, so the critical thing is this screw here, and you must use a really good quality 1.5 wrench because these are very shallow screws. That one there is what obviously sets the gear mesh, but because it only has one screw, the motor can pivot around that mesh. So this back bracket is very critical. So we'll make sure we slacken that off and then press it up against the motor and then tighten them back up. So it's very important to use a very good quality 1.5 Allen where the tip hasn't worn at all. We use these Wera, and they're good because they have like a cutting edge. They're not a conventional Allen, and they will hold on to almost any Allen in the right size, obviously. So just make sure all those are tight. That keeps the motor stable. And I'm a little bit tight on gear mesh, so we can just slacken this one off. And normally I would let that run now to loosen up that mesh. Also, I recommend Loctiting. I'm not going to do it here, but I'm going to loosen off the screws and then squeeze down between my thumb and finger, squeezing down on the axle and the chassis. That pressure down and then lightly do up the screws, crisscross. That squares up the uprights. A lot of people use a 6mm drill blank. We sell one, but in all honesty, that really doesn't do a good job because it actually enlarges the holes, because these are slightly under 6mm to hold on to the bearings. And in all honesty, if squeezing down and the bearings do not align the axle, then the bearings are not worth using anyway. I guess it's free there. Obviously on the front ones you can't do that because you have a independent front wheel. I put them up against a square edge and align the front wheels so as they're not towed in or towed out. Anyway, you'll notice that this is slightly offset. People often don't realise that, and they put the tyres on the wrong way around. Okay, that's the basics. I usually put a twist in these wires here so as they don't press up hard on the underneath of the tray, the driver tray, and then you can tape it down here with a little bit of, I use surgical tape, and then you will want to make sure that these screws are tight, which these are. Again, I would recommend Loctiting them, but even if you don't Loctite, make sure they're tight and make sure your chassis floats. So that's the first part of it, what I would do setting up a car. Make sure those wires are down. Make sure this interior tray is fitted well. You'll often find they're a bit loose. I use shoe glue to hold them in place, and I weight them so as it pushes it up, because you can see that's a little bit popping down. It pushes it up with a weight like a large socket to pin it up, and then shoe glue on the sides here and here. Let it dry and then take your weight off. I also put a bit of shoe glue here and here to stop this popping off. We often see driver figures falling off. I recommend taking the interior out before you shoe glue it, and I use black shoe glue to hold the driver in place, because he's only held on by these little hot knife pieces here. It's easy for those to break loose, and then your driver's floating around, and if once you shoe glued all the interior in, then it's really difficult to get it back out. I also put a little bit of shoe glue in the corner here to stop this from falling off, which it often will in an impact, and maybe a little bit of shoe glue up front here to protect this air dam. And that would be the basic setup. Anyway, we're going to try this car now.